like to do the welcome. We have
Yeah.
you as the first person, right?
Awesome. Let's get started, and hopefully, if a few more trickle in, we can catch on. But hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I know in the time of COVID and all of that, it may be a little difficult to squeeze in something like this. So we really appreciate you joining us tonight to talk about such an important cause. My name is Mona Amhari, and I have the pleasure of working with I always say it wrong, Vincentian Ohio Action Network and the Think Tanks on Poverty to bring you this webinar series. Others that are working on this project with me that you will hear from later on include Leisha, who is an amazing organizer in Newark, Wendy, who is the wonderful executive director of WAN, Stephanie Van Bibber, who has an amazing story, is in recovery and runs 3 recovery homes. And last but not least, Misty, who also has a super powerful story and works full time to help bridge the gap between faith communities and addiction. Today's webinar, we focused on highlighting powerful stories from Misty and Stephanie and Reagan as well, from people who have struggled with addiction, as well as educating on what addiction opioid use disorder is and some of the harmful stigmas that surround addiction. This initial step of addressing stigma and storytelling is a crucial step in the process to fighting addiction. Barriers of fear, ignorance, and stigma are broken down when people take the risk to break the silence and speak out about sharing their struggles of living with addiction, or by sharing the struggles of loving and caring family members that are also impacted by addiction. And that is what we are aiming to do today. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Stephanie to share her story.
Thank you, Mona, and thank you to everyone who's attending. Your support is really greatly appreciated. My name is Stephanie, and I'm a person in recovery. I also work for an amazing organization called Whole Living Recovery. We are a not-for-profit organization that provides safe and stable housing to people in recovery. We have 1 women's house and 2 men's houses here in Newark. And I work for a great lady called Carrie Penland. She's also the founder and director of Whole Living Recovery. So I want to be able to share with you kind of like my experiences on what's going on in Licking County and what we're seeing in the rises of overdoses and overdose deaths. National Overdose Awareness Day is on August 31st. Ohio CAN, which stands for Change Addiction Now, and Trish Perry, along with several volunteers, will be hosting its 6th rally in honor to remember the lives lost to overdoses. And just to kind of give you like a perspective on kind of what we're dealing with this year, we do t-shirts, and we print on the back of the t-shirts everyone's name that have lost their life to addiction. Last year we had 99 names that were printed on that shirt. This year, well over 150 to 175. And every day someone new loses their life. And the response to this rally is really overwhelming with the amount of people who are responding to it and would like to add their loved ones to the back of the shirt. So that kind of should just, put it into perspective of the numbers that we're looking at. Working in a recovery house and living in a recovery house, I see, the pull of addiction and what it has on people, and I watch it drag people back out sometimes. I had a girl move out of our house in November of last year. She was here for a very short time, and unfortunately, when she left, she relapsed. She became, engulfed again in active addiction. So on July 10th of this year, she phoned her mother and asked her mom to come and pick her up from the west side of Columbus, asking for a ride back to Newark. Her mom refused to pick her up. And on July 14th, she overdosed from fentanyl in the backyard of an abandoned house on the west side of Columbus. On July 16th, the police found her decomposing body under a comforter in that backyard. Her mom would not know any of this until around August 8th, when she finally, after not hearing from her daughter for weeks, reported her missing. And only after filing that missing persons report did they notify her mother that she'd been in the Franklin County morgue now for 3 weeks. Her mother said that she'll live with that guilt forever for not going to get her. She leaves behind a little boy that will now be raised by his grandmother. On Saturday morning, I was notified that a good friend of mine who lives in Newark was found on the bathroom floor, not breathing from an overdose of fentanyl. They were able to do CPR and they were able to contact EMS, they were able to revive her, but they did not. She didn't have Narcan in the house. Her boyfriend didn't have Narcan in the house, which Narcan is a life-saving medication that will overturn and reverse a drug overdose from fentanyl. The EMS was able to provide them afterwards with Narcan, but they did not have any themselves. Moving on to another story, I was asked to help a friend of mine's daughter get into treatment last week. And I just want to share that experience because I think it's important. I think it's important to know what's going on, in our community with trying to reach out for help. She arrived from Oklahoma last week to Newark, and she did express interest on going to treatment. So the first treatment center that we called directed us to another provider to get an assessment done to pay for half of her inpatient stay. The earliest they could get her in for that assessment was September 10th. So I called the next treatment center on the list, and the intake coordinator was on vacation. The next treatment center on the list, I called, and they said due to her being on seizure medication, she would have to be seen by a neuro doctor, and they would have to clear her before she could be accepted into their program. So she's from out of state, so she doesn't have a family doctor to get that referral for that neuro doctor. So it would be 3 months before she could get into a new practitioner, and then another 3 months to get into a specialist to be seen to get her cleared so she could enter inpatient treatment. And every door that was slammed made her feel more isolated and more hopeless. And this is happening in our community. There was zero sense of urgency and no sense of the fact that this is life or death for people. And I'm really sad to say I don't know where she is today. The people out there who are lost in active addiction, they're somebody's somebody. They are somebody's family member. They are loved, and their loss of life is immeasurable. I asked my dad yesterday why I was able to find recovery, and so many sadly don't. And the only thing I could think of was that I'm not going to waste my second chance, and I have to be the voice for everyone who's lost theirs. We as a community, a faith community, have to be their voice. And we have to start now because people are losing the battle every single day, every single minute. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Stephanie. Super powerful and grounds us in the work that we have ahead. All right, I'm going to pass it over to Leisha, and then she's going to talk about what addiction is and substance use disorder on a more educational level.
Can you see me, Mona? Okay. I'm sorry, are you advancing the slides? Okay. Hi, everybody. Hi, my name is Leisha Farias. I'm an organizer with the Think Tanks on Poverty. And again, we welcome you and thank you for joining us tonight to learn a little bit more about this incredible crisis that we're facing. Not only are we facing the pandemic and the crisis with the economy. But because people are in isolation, because, meetings have been canceled or not in person, all of the reasons that people are further isolated, as Stephanie said, we're losing more people every day. And so we're happy to bring a little bit of education to this webinar and just bring people up to speed to what's really happening and to update people in terms of what really is addiction. And as you can see on the slide, it's a brain disease. And I think a lot of people that hasn't been in the lexicon. And we have become a culture where addiction, people are mostly blamed for their addiction, no matter what the addiction is. But we know with the opiate epidemic and how strong it's been in Ohio that we really all need to learn to understand that it is a brain disease and that it is manifested by compulsive substance use despite the harmful consequences, so that the changes that happen in the brain really block any kind of logic. And I think we so often try to come at this problem by providing people with logical responses and ideas, but we really need to understand what substance use disorder does, how it distorts thinking, behavior, and body functions, and that we're dealing with people that are really in a crisis. And so no matter of logical talking or convincing really is going to help the person. As we see from the National Institute on Drug Abuse, there's a whole host of reasons why people get into addiction. A lot of people are in despair, are facing all kinds of diseases of despair. And so when you're blocked out of the mainstream culture, or your basic needs are not being met, a lot of people are just looking for a way to feel good and to feel better and to relieve the stress. And I think we've all seen the statistics on how the average person is dealing with that. But people that are facing this kind of a disorder, a disease, are really, the stakes are so great. And so I really feel like it's our responsibility to get up to date with this information. So, and we also know through the work with the think tanks that so many people that are experiencing the issues of poverty and also have the dual diagnosis with mental health issues, that it's even tougher, to face someone's, if they're facing an addiction.
Awesome, thank you, Leisha. All very important information. I'm a visual learner, so I understand things a little better in a visual means. So here's a video that I think does an amazing job of explaining addiction and how it works in the brain. So bear with me here if we do have any technical difficulties. We shouldn't.
Scientists first began to understand addiction as a brain disorder in the 1950s. Doctors Olds and Milner, in laboratory studies of rats, found the parts of the brain affected by addiction. But then in 1994, doctors Volkov and Shelbert, top neuroscientists, ran CAT scans of the brain that showed the effects of substance use disorders. Like other diseases, these scans showed it affected tissue function. There are two main parts of the brain affected by drug use: the limbic system and the cortex. The limbic system, located deep within the brain, is responsible for our basic survival instincts. So when you do essential things to stay alive, like eat, drink, find shelter, have sex, or care for your young, your brain reinforces behaviors that cause the release of dopamine from this region. That reward for surviving is also transmitted to the amygdala and hippocampus, which records a memory of that feeling, so we seek it again. This is our survival hardwiring. Addiction also affects this area up here in the prefrontal cortex, which is what separates us from other animals. This is where decision-making and impulse control live. When drugs or alcohol are used, they activate the same dopamine process in the survival center. And when use is repeated, that substance can hijack that part of the brain. This hijacker changes the brain and weakens this system to make it believe that the primary need for survival is the drug. In hijacking the brain, it can usurp those primary motivations, food, water, shelter, sex, and protecting our young. And the hijacker needs more and more of the substance to activate the same level of reward or feeling of pleasure, causing the brain tissue to become increasingly damaged with continued drug use. There are factors that put you at higher risk for the hijacker, including individual factors like genes and age of first use, and then environmental factors like drug availability. But if the hijacker takes hold, addiction is treatable. Advancements have been made in assessments, detox, treatment programs, recovery supports, and medications to treat addiction. Brain scans show that once in recovery, the tissue in the limbic system and cortex can get better. With your help, we can expand these innovations to help millions of individuals and families and ensure that addiction is treated as the medical issue that it is. Together, we can solve this. Join us.
All right, always a good video to kind of visualize what addiction is. So now let's transition into, now we know, kind of have a good idea of what addiction is.
Not
it looks like. Okay, sorry about that. But now that we know what addiction is and looks like, let's kind of get into the stigma around addiction that may be harmful. Often, another stigma that I know and have heard is that addiction only affects those who are using a said substance, which is far from the truth. Addiction can affect everyone. It can affect the families of those impacted. Even entire communities can be impacted by addiction and opiate use disorder. So let's keep that in mind as we hear from our next speaker, Misty.
Hi, my name is Misty, and I'm an advocate, supporter, and educator in my community for people who struggle with addiction. My reasons are many, but one of them is my own personal story. I come from a family where several members struggle with addiction. The drugs of abuse range from alcohol, prescription pills, to heroin and meth. I have had loved ones go to prison, be in recovery, relapse, and die due to drug-related causes. Because I have immediate family members who struggle with addiction, I am predisposed to addictive tendencies. One thing people don't always understand is addiction can start after taking legitimate medications for illnesses. I lost my sister-in-law to addiction that started this way. She became addicted to prescription pain pills after a diagnosis of Crohn's disease that resulted in multiple surgeries. She began abusing heroin and then fentanyl, and she battled her addiction for years. I found out from a family member that she was desperately trying to get clean and was scheduled to go into inpatient treatment the week after her passing. They told me that they believed she wanted just one more high, believed that she wanted to do it before she gave it up for good. Sadly, she did not make it. Her name is Dusty. She died from a fentanyl overdose on May the 2nd, 2018. It is important to support people that are seeking help and treatment. It is common that people may relapse in the process because the brain is craving the drug, and it's hard for many to kick it with willpower alone. Medications relieve the withdrawal symptoms and psychological cravings that cause chemical imbalances in the body. Medications used for MAT are evidence-based treatment options that show a stronger outcome for keeping people alive than those who try to stop using on their own. Another thing about addiction is it's not a moral failing. It often starts as a coping mechanism for people dealing with trauma and stress in their lives. My struggle with addiction started this way. I was married to my high school sweetheart for 14 years. He struggled with addiction for most of them. I had no clue how bad it was until the end of our marriage because he hid it so well. In fact, from the outside, we looked like a model family. He had a good job. I stayed home with our children. I was active in my church, and the children attended with me. And I held neighborhood gatherings that I hosted, but we were dealing with a lot of chaos in our home. Our trauma. Our lives changed forever the day my ex-husband abused me in a heated domestic dispute. It was so severe I was hospitalized for 7 days. I had to have a nurse and my mother take care of me for 3 months. My ex-husband was locked up, and my children and I were uprooted from our home. We were in the process of moving because our home was in foreclosure, and it fell through because of what happened. The owners of the property kept all of our money, and our belongings were moved into storage. Our sole provider was locked away in prison. I had no home, no money, and no job. I was unable to work anyway due to medical restrictions. I was unable to care for our 3 children, ages 12, 4, and 2 at the time, because of the condition I was in. After I was well enough to be on my own, we got our own place. A friend from my church was a realtor, and he got us into a brand new apartment, and things started to look really good. We started visiting their father at the facility because we were invited to be involved in a recovery process. I thought this would be helpful to all of us. We went through accountability sessions with him, family preservation classes. He was enrolled in sobriety treatment programs and attended several NA meetings a week. He was sober for the first time in years. From my story, I know that families of the incarcerated and victims of violence need support. Also, people who are coming out of incarceration back to the community need help, and their family is not always the best people to offer this situation. I tried to help him when he came home. I felt sorry for him because he was ashamed and shunned by everyone for his crime, and I let him stay with us. I told myself that he was high out of his mind the day he hurt me, and that in his right frame of mind, he never would have done it. It didn't turn out well. He ended up cheating and leaving me for someone else. And I was eventually kicked out of my apartment because I violated the terms of my lease by letting someone with a felony stay with us. So my children and I were looking for a place to live again. I was in a fragile place, so I reached out to a counselor and started therapy. When painful things happen to us, our body and mind tries to cope to protect ourselves. It's not surprising that I was diagnosed with PTSD, clinical depression, generalized anxiety disorder, OCD with intrusive thoughts. I started a combination of meds and was in therapy for a very good while. I started to recover and I was doing okay until my therapist destroyed the trust between us and I shut down. I stopped going and never returned. I believe that was the breaking point. I was over the edge. It was like a switch had been flipped. I felt numb. I started drinking, going out to the bars. I was blacking out. I was lost. I wanted to have fun. I wanted to meet men. I wanted to feel wanted. I wanted to numb the pain, to forget, and to escape. And in the process, I turned from my faith. Substances helped me numb the pain I was feeling. I became connected with others who were enabling my lifestyle. I lost connection to my church and others in my life that could have helped me. I am not alone. Many people dealing with mental health needs have difficulty trusting others because of the pain and past experiences that they've had, which can create a barrier for accessing help. Negative experiences with therapists can foster resentment and lack of trust, like it did with me. But it must be said that a bad experience does not mean it will be like that every time. It can take some time to find the right help, to find the right therapist that you feel comfortable with. It is part of the process. I wish I would have continued treatment because today I firmly believe that therapy, whether it be for addiction and or mental illness, is necessary in recovery. I eventually got sober. It was then that I decided I wanted to help people like me, people who are hurting, who have seen struggles, who have been abused, who have trauma, and need someone in their corner that understands where they are. I started college and not long after remarried. I was working towards a degree in human services and an emphasis on addiction. Through my education, I got a better understanding of myself. And I utilized what I'd learned to stay sober, to keep me on the right track, and I started to feel a pull to my faith again. Then another traumatic event occurred that I didn't know how to handle. While I was in college, my youngest son got very sick. We received an unexpected serious medical diagnosis, and we almost lost him to sepsis. That sent me into a tailspin. I held it together because I had to, but not long after he recovered, I fell completely apart. This was worse than the first time. My mental health rapidly declined, and I was reluctant to reach out for help because I was ashamed. I was supposed to be the helper because of my experience with my therapist in the past. I didn't trust anyone, and I had no church family to speak of because I had walked away. Sometimes even when people encourage you to go to church or see a pastor, it doesn't mean you'll listen. But we must trust God to do the work in each person we meet, and we need to be where they're at. For example, I had a close friend who knew everything that was going on. She was my support person and a devout woman of God with unshakable faith. She asked me daily to go to church with her, but I declined. I felt my relationship with God was just fine. I kept him on the back burner because that's what made me comfortable. I felt ashamed, unworthy, unlovable, dirty, and deep down I didn't believe he would accept me back. I did not understand grace and mercy like I do today. One day, in the middle of a complete mental breakdown, a friend reached out to me. She knew I was in bad shape. She said, "I'm picking you up and taking you to see my pastor." Before I knew it, she was at the door. She drove me to her church, and her pastor, who is now my pastor, welcomed without pause. He questioned without question or judgment. We talked for a long time, and he prayed with me. I felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders, and that day, my life changed. I turned back to my faith, and although I have moments of weakness and times my faith is shaken, I have never walked away. The irony is, I left my faith because I was lost, but I came back to my faith because I was lost. I believe that when you're at the end of your rope and you need someone to help you hold on, that faith community is the answer. Hurting people need support, acceptance, and a judgment-free zone. They need a safe place, but most of all, we need love. My ex-husband has been sober for 20 years, and because of my education, I have a different perspective on his addiction, his struggles, and why he abused. And through my faith, I have found forgiveness, and I'm at peace with that part of my life now. People in prison and jail need help and support too. Many have trauma and addiction in their background. This is also generational because my ex-husband and I have addictive personalities. We pass that down to our children. They all struggle with some type of addictive behaviors and mental health problems. These were not only inherited, but I believe manifested later in life because of trauma. Individuals, families need help, not judgment. The more we can be honest about the reality of addiction, the more we can open up tools and normalize getting help. There should be no shame. In closing, I just want to say part of how I think communities can show love is to learn more about addiction and what can cause it. How can we welcome people to our communities who are struggling? How can we help those family members that are impacted? Everyone has a different story, a unique individual path to their recovery. In the church, we can work in doing no harm by meeting them where they are and by supporting them in any way possible. We can also listen to people's stories like mine to learn more and build compassion. We can help build a bridge to recovery, resources, medically assisted treatment, faith, spiritual communities, and people that make it to help people make it through when life gets hard. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Misty, for sharing that and being vulnerable with us. Your story is incredibly powerful and needs to be told. So thank you again for sharing all of that with us. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Stephanie to talk about stigma and misconceptions.
Thank you, Mona. So how can we unintentionally be doing harm within our communities when it comes to addiction? Harmful stigmas, turning those struggling with addiction away, which kind of resonates in with the story that I was telling you earlier, with just every door getting slammed, trying to get someone into treatment. Misconceptions about addiction, homelessness, and mental illness. Not knowing what or how to provide resources that are available to those struggling with addiction. And I think that's really where like education comes in. Common stigmas and misconceptions. Addiction is a choice that people make. I don't think that anybody wakes up in the morning and wants to be violently ill or live on the streets or be hungry. I know I didn't. When I was in active addiction, I didn't have a choice. It was just obsession, compulsion to use. People who are homeless must be addicts and vice versa. I have been homed and I've been unsheltered. Addiction will target anyone, whether they have a home or whether they don't. Once an addict, always an addict. I can honestly say, sitting here today, I am not in active addiction, and I was for 20 years. All addiction should be treated the same way. And that's something I'm learning the longer I stay in recovery and I work with other people that are in recovery, is that everybody has a different pathway. There's more than one way to recover. And we as a community, even as myself working with other addicts, we need to embrace that. People who are addicted should just use willpower or get over it. I know for me, I had a lot of trauma, and every time I used, I would just shovel on more trauma, and I would use to cover up that trauma. And there was no amount of willpower or getting over it that was going to keep me clean. Addiction is just about drugs and alcohol. This just goes back to what I just said. I used to cover up trauma, to cover up feelings. It was more than the drugs and alcohol. I was the problem. Addiction is only a choice poor people, homeless people, or people with other issues can get. It can affect anyone. I think we've seen that. I think we've seen that a lot in the news. I mean, you see people in Hollywood die that have so much money. It doesn't matter. It will target anyone. Addiction to prescription pills is different than being addicted to drugs or alcohol. It's not, at least in my opinion, it's not. When you form a physical dependency on a medication and it's going to make you sick when you withdraw from it, and then it launches you into that obsession and compulsion, it really is, it's all the same. It's still an addiction. You still have to check the motives as to why you're using.
Awesome.
So I think a lot of those are really a lot of misconceptions, that I can speak, from having personal experience with. But people don't know that, until you're educated, or until you live it, or until you have a family member or someone that you love suffer from this disease.
Absolutely. Thank you, Stephanie. All super true. And really important to address all of this, even if it might be painful to hear. It's okay if any of us have held these stigmas or misconceptions before. We can only get better by accepting each other and growing from that. So now that we've covered a bit about what addiction is and some of the stigma around it, we're going to go ahead and break into breakout rooms to just have an open discussion around what we've covered so far. And then here's a few questions to get us started up on the screen, talking about what we've learned, if you've learned anything so far, if you've held any misconceptions or stigmas about addiction before this video or this webinar. And again, it is okay if you did. We are here to learn and grow. And I want to emphasize that this is not a place for judgment. We can only grow individually and collectively if we work together to break down the stigmas and fear around addiction. And we need to do so without tearing each other down. So please keep that in mind if someone does want to talk about that. And then a few other questions about if you've seen any stigma or misconceptions in your community, or how have you in your faith community combated stigma around addiction. So those are some questions to get us started. We'll probably break away for maybe 10 minutes or so, and then we'll come back to finish out the rest of the presentation. So bear with me here as we get everyone into breakout rooms.
I'm going to have Mona also paste those questions into the chat. So once you get into the breakout room, I think that you'll be able to see those. So we'll just, they'll come once you get in your chat session.
Welcome back, everyone. Welcome. I hope we all engaged in.
We did.
Awesome.
We were in the middle. We were pulled us out mid-conversation.
Oh, I know. I wish we could have a whole hour to talk about all this. We could with everyone's experiences and stuff. But we can always make more room afterwards.
Yep.
It doesn't mean the conversation has to end. All right, let's get back to the slides here. We're gonna actually, I hope everyone engaged in meaningful conversation. And now we're gonna hear from our last speaker, Reagan, who is also in recovery. Pass it over to her.
Hi, my name is Dan. I live in whole living recovery, and so Stephanie had asked me to share a little bit about what works and what helps me in mine. I know that you guys are doing a grant of some sort. I'm not real entirely sure about everything that goes on with it, and I've heard that you guys are talking about Narcan. I was Narcan twice, and it actually did not bring me back. Somebody was with me on that night that said a prayer, and I think that's what my higher power wanted me to know at that point. That there was nothing that was going to bring me back, that he chose to bring me back that time. So like, it's sad to say that at that point in time, I actually did not stop. I left the hospital after I was Narcan and went and used for like another couple months. And so anyways, after I got clean, I was arrested, and I got clean. The things that work for me today, like, it's a balance for me. Everything has to be balanced, because in my addiction, everything's out of balance. Like, I was a completely all or nothing person. I was all or nothing for drugs and money. So today, my higher power helps me get through, 24 hours a day. He helps me make the right choices to call somebody. He helps me make the right choices to, continue on living in this way of life. I think today is like 23 months and 5 days that I have clean, and I'm never able to do it alone. Like, I'm never able to do it by myself. At different points in time, there are different people. The way that I see things, I do work a 12-step program and have a support system. I have a sponsor. I work the 12 steps, but I have different people at different moments that I'm able to go to. My sponsor isn't the only thing that I go to. I'm also able to rely on my mom and different people today, Stephanie, just different relationships that I've been able to build over the course of time. I'm able to use and appreciate the help from different places. I kind of had a loss of a train of thought, but other than that, like getting into recovery, it's really hard because, we want to all or nothing everything, like get everything back together overnight, get a job, get a car, have a license, have a home, all these things, fix relationships, and like trust is something huge. Trying to build back with people that, we've destructed along the way. So like Stephanie said, I overheard her saying a couple minutes ago, just time and patience. My mom would have loved for me to try heroin when I first tried it at 16 and been like, oh, I don't ever want to do it again. And unfortunately, that's not the way it went. I did not get clean until I was almost 29 years old. So throughout that process, it took a lot of praying from my family, a lot of praying for the protection over me while I made the choices that I made. a lot of getting closer and drawing closer to God. I don't know, like for me, the world seeks worldly answers, and I tried the doctors, I tried the medications, I tried all that, and today, at different points in my life, I was on Suboxone for a couple years. I did have mental health and got treated for mental health and things like that, and today, I'm grateful that I'm free of everything. I don't take anything today. I haven't taken anything for almost 2 years, and but those times in my life where I did, it helped me this time to be able to look back and see there was a time where, I did live. When I was on Suboxone, I did go to school. I did have a job. I did do certain things with my life that I had never done before that. And then I went back out. And, I was probably like 21 or 22 at that point, so it took me until I was 29, almost 29, to finally come back. So, and I can honestly say like 100% that I know that the only thing that kept me sustained over that period of time on so many occasions where I should have been dead was prayer. The prayer of others that met me along the way, my family and everything like that. So today and every day, I have to completely give my life over to God because he chose me. And when I recognized that he chose me, it made me want to choose him. So just time and patience and unconditional love. You can still love people by saying no, and things like that about money and everything. But I pray for people, a lot of people that I know in recovery. I pray for them. I'm not always there to be able to do everything they want me to do or ask me to do or things like that, but I do say say a prayer for them, and what God needs them to have, he'll provide. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank
Rachel.
you.
Go ahead, Wendy.
Give me just 1 second. I'm sorry. I got bumped off and I'm going back to my computer. Just 1 second.
As she's getting ready, thank you so much again, Reagan, for sharing your story with us. What I believe truly moves people is not the cold hard facts about addiction, but the real stories from real people and their families and how it's impacted them and how they have come to recovery as well through their faith or through any other means. We're going to wrap up with a general 5 caring congregation steps and it outlines a way that your congregation can become a caring congregation that pledges to do no harm to those in the community. And Wendy will break that down more for us.
Great. Thank you. Can you all hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. Sorry for the conflict. Alrighty. All right. So we were interested in sharing these steps with you all this evening. There's an organization called Mental Health Ministries that was started by a pastor who had struggled with issues of mental health, and we know mental health and addiction oftentimes go hand in hand, and there's a lot of ways that they play off of one another. And there were so Mental Health Ministries is someplace we wanted to just flag for folks on this call for some resources, and we're going to go through a couple of recommendations that came off of their website that we thought were very pertinent and very applicable to what we are talking about this evening with addiction. There's many ways that congregations can begin or expand a ministry to and with persons and their families impacted by addiction. While the journey to become a caring congregation can be described in many different ways, this caring congregation model uses a 5-step approach. The 5 steps include education, which is part of what we're doing tonight, covenant or commitment, welcoming people with no judgment, support, and advocacy. We're going to go through each one of those. So the first step in creating caring congregations is education. This begins with leadership of the faith community or the church. It could be a minister, a priest, an imam, a rabbi, working to educate themselves so that they would be able to, and I'm seeing your chat right in front of my box, Mona, if you can move. Actually, I can pull, I don't know if I can pull this another way. Okay, there we go. So they'll be able to recognize symptoms and make appropriate referrals to counselors and psychiatrists if that's necessary. I think that we've heard a range of stories on this call tonight, folks that have sought assistance in different ways at different points of their journey, which I think is just very important to hear, because not everybody has the same path. People have different ways that they've found recovery that they may feel very, very passionate about, and that is great. We want to support folks in the processes that are working for them. I think also with faith communities, though, we need to learn about, we may be having people coming to us or to the clergy members or the leaders of various ministries seeking assistance, and there's a lot we can do to help people in very, very practical ways. But there's also places where, somebody may be struggling with a psychiatric diagnosis or, severe depression or, having hallucination or any kind of thing that really would require some mental health professionals. So it's important for those of us in the faith community to understand those resources and not be, reluctant to encourage people and to work with them on those mental health needs. So some of the ways that other ways that education could take place, of course, is inviting, a speaker or a workshop or folks that have experienced these issues or are professionals in this field to come and speak and teach in your community. There's a lot of stigma, and when you can bring in trusted voices and folks who have experience in these issues, it will help to break down some of those misconceptions. There's a blank in here. Get education material and referral information from groups like NAMI, groups like OMAS. There's a lot of different organizations at our health departments, right? Our local level, our state level, our national level, this mental health ministries website. In fact, if you happen to go there, they do have a whole resource tab where you can identify other resources that are tailored to be able to be used or printed in your faith community, and you're welcome to take and adapt those as you see fit. And then, trying to engage in more dialogue around addiction, just to where it's not like a taboo subject to discuss. Some of the things that people had shared tonight are very personal. And of course, it takes people some time in their journey to get through experiences in their life where they feel like they're ready to share about, or that they want to share in a public space about what they've gone through. But for many people, coming through the challenges and trials in their life, it can be very healing and very inspiring and encouraging for them to be able to give from those experiences that they've had to bless and to help other people, and to put language and words to experiences that others may have not been able to talk about yet. And I think that our faith communities, if we can create spaces and model that by considering, what are the stories that, you may have in your life, if you're a leader in the faith community, that you may be willing to share. These are things that I think help foster more healthy vulnerability in community, where folks can see the realities of what we go through, because we're all human beings that have, in fact, quite a lot of similarity and can relate to one another oftentimes with the struggles that we have. The second step in becoming a caring congregation is covenant. Biblical term could also be called a commitment. This is when your leadership in your faith community is intentional about seeking ways to become caring to folks that are struggling with addiction, mental health, or other kind of needs that are making them vulnerable in the community. It's often a concerned layperson who initiates this process, because a lot of times pastors are overwhelmed with a lot going on. And so, I think it's encouraging when in our faith communities, folks are bringing forward those stories or those experiences and may want to reach out to others. So if you're on this call and you're a clergy member, I know oftentimes you're looking for lay people to champion things. And this is one of those things that we want to encourage faith communities to be really open to, and to encourage and to care for those in your community who may be interested in ministering and caring for others through their experience. Laypersons can collaborate with the church leadership to form a task force or look at ways that the particular community can provide education around mental illness or addiction. You could adopt a statement or a pledge, stating your congregation's commitment to this type of ministry, or, to helping those in the community, both and, right? I think that, being able to be more visible about the things that are often shamed in society can create openness for people to come forward with these experiences, which is very important for them to find support and community and healing and trust. So the next one we have on here is welcoming. The third step is welcoming. So seeking ways to integrate people who have previously struggled with addiction in our faith communities. Oftentimes we distance ourselves from people who are most in need of a welcoming community. And so, there's a lot of interesting ways. It's not just about, we are serving people who are coming into the community or in our communities that may be struggling, but how are we lifting them up as leaders in the community and meeting them where they are at. This could include having people impacted by addiction involved from the front, from the pulpit, from the, BEMA, from the church, from the front of the faith community, involved in prayers or liturgies or sermon illustrations, and honoring their story and what they contribute in the community of faith. It could also be things like providing training for ushers and greeters and helping folks be welcoming to others, or having people trained to be as companions to accompany a person to worship or to talk, or simply have them find a quiet place to rest. And I know we do a lot of work with people who, in my organization, the Vincentian Ohio Action Network, we do a lot of work with people who are also coming out of jail and prison, right? And a lot of them have struggled with these things. And it is intimidating to go into a faith community if you don't know anybody there, or you're just coming back to the community, or coming out of a sober house, or you're coming out of incarceration, or you're coming, back into a place that you haven't been. So having folks that see that as part of their ministry and are being lifted up and empowered in that way is quite a beautiful thing. And in fact, is part and parcel of what it means for us to show love in our faith community. So I think that's a wonderful example. And then supporting people. We are brought up to be in America, especially, we're brought up to be strong and self-sufficient and independent people. It can be hard for us to ask for help. And so we keep our struggles hidden. We all do this in different ways, and we all have different struggles. But God wants us to care for one another and to allow others to care for us in our time of need. We are called to bear one another's burdens, as is mentioned in Galatians, and to love our neighbor as ourselves, right? And there's many ways, that you could provide practical and tangible support besides just welcoming people. But how can we, proactively have things like a referral list of mental health services in the community, or, sometimes people call our faith communities looking for help, and folks that are answering those phones don't always know, what those resources are in the community. And so going out and building those relationships so that you can make positive handoffs, especially if you're receiving these types of requests in your faith community, is very important thing to consider. Also providing counseling services through a sliding scale or a voucher program. Some people don't have access to these types of counseling. It depends what your healthcare is. I mean, if you have Medicaid or other types of things, you might be able to get into some counseling at a low or no cost, but even folks that are working families are struggling, right? Of course, we all know healthcare is a mess, and it can be very expensive, or maybe doesn't even cover the types of things that you're looking for. So our faith communities can offer additional support that can create spaces like that for folks for counseling or spiritual counsel. Inviting members in programs to provide meals or housing, so meeting people's basic needs if we come across that, and finding ways to reach out and support family members. And, you know, I think some of the things that Misty was sharing, you know, with her situation, and when her ex-husband was coming out of incarceration, she was trying to help him. But, you know, there's other things that could be done to come around people who are in these situations. And having those bridges built will help us know when and how to step in and help when trust has been established like that. And then providing medically assisted treatment. And our third webinar is going to discuss this further. We're on part one of we have 4 parts. You can each one of them standalone will be, you know, a succinct presentation, but they are going to build off of each other. So we invite you to join us for the upcoming webinars. The third one, we're going to have some folks from Harm Reduction Ohio with us, and they'll be talking about Narcan and how faith communities could be part of having Narcan and making that available in their community, which is a drug that helps, reverse the impact of opiates on the body. So somebody who's overdosed, it can bring them back, help them breathe again. So in fact, bringing people back from death. So it's a very, very powerful tool that we would like to help support being made more widely available in our communities and helping people understand that. So we're going to dig into more about medically assisted treatment, what that is, what it means, what it looks like, and how Narcan even more in the third webinar. So just a little plug for you to help encourage others to join us, because we understand that there's a lot of questions that people may have about that, and we want to create a space for people to learn and ask those questions. All right. And then the 5th one is advocacy. I know we're getting close to the end here. You know, we heard from Stephanie and in our breakout session, in fact, folks were talking about this, that it is very difficult at times to be able to help people access treatment. And you may be calling provider after provider trying to get people in, and there's the particularities of what they're dealing with, or the geography of where they're located, or the drug of choice that they're using. Any one of those things may begin to have barriers for them to get access at any particular place. So, you know, we want to be a part of advocating for people's basic human rights to access medical care. That includes mental health, that includes medically assisted treatment, that includes all the things that people may need to get well. And so we're encouraging our faith communities to be a part of that. Part of that could be about being informed about pending legislation and advocacy. And there's various groups that do work on those things. And we'll be sending out emails to folks that are part of our webinars with additional resources later on, but that's certainly one way. So, you know, working with elected officials, a lot of the ways our systems, our structures are set by our public lawmakers, and so educating them about the realities on the ground and engaging with them, educating them, and working with our elected officials is very critical at all levels of government. And then partnering with other organizations and events. And I know, you know, Stephanie mentioned the overdose events that are going on. There's many groups that are working at the local level to create that type of community and awareness. And we really want to encourage faith communities to step outside of sometimes their bubble or their lane, to see what is going on in your community and how you may help, or if there's events that you might be able to host or invite folks that are part of that to come and share in your faith community, so we can begin to cross-pollinate or whatever, you know, work together as a community. And then, of course, the larger community, there's a lot of folks in treatment and recovery that are relying and building in their faith as a critical piece of their recovery. Most of us on this call may identify with the faith community, and so that's just a critical part for many, many people. Not everybody wants to incorporate that, and we realize that that's everybody's journey may be different, but we want to encourage folks to be able to share what is helping them and how their faith is contributing and how their faith communities are contributing, so that we can work on having a more robust ecosystem of support for people. And so we're just grateful for folks that were sharing during this call tonight about their faith and how that was such an important part of your journey. And we're so grateful for you to be here today. I know it's 7:19. I don't know when I was supposed to end, but I'm going to stop, and we can move on to our final comments.
Awesome. Thank you, Wendy, so much for that. Very important. It's a good layout for what we can do, and it's pretty general. And as we move on to these webinars, we'll get into more details. And of course, with anything, it depends on your own congregation, within your own community, what your caring congregation would look like. So once again, definitely want to encourage folks to check out that Mental Health Ministries website. They have a lot of amazing resources, and we will send a recording of this whole presentation, the slides, and other resources to everyone that joined after this. So if you don't jot down the website now, it is totally fine. You'll get it later. I hope everyone learned something new today. With our last few minutes, we're going to cover a few more things. And I hope you can join us in the next webinar to continue this conversation. It's an honor to not only work so closely with faith leaders and those in the faith community who are in recovery or still struggling with addiction, but it's also an honor to be able to openly talk about all of this with you. I would like to take our last few minutes here to acknowledge another ongoing injustice in our country. Welcoming communities and caring congregations for those who are suffering includes how we are showing up and supporting people of color and families who are also dealing with trauma of seeing lives lost on a regular basis. Yesterday in Kenosha, Wisconsin, another Black man by the name of Jacob Blake was shot several times by a police officer as his 3 kids were in the car watching. I strongly believe that we are all one family, and when any of us feels or experiences pain, we all feel that pain and should work together to prevent it from happening again. I would like to take a moment of silence for Jacob Blake and his kids, for Breonna Taylor, for Ahmaud Arbery, for Rhea Milton, for George Floyd, and for the countless others who have been impacted by police brutality and racism. If you would like to say a prayer for those victims and their loved ones, now that is also welcome at this time. So let us take a moment. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining me in that. As with any problem, the first step to solving it is talking about it and acknowledging our collective pain and experiences. So before we go, I have a few asks of all of you, so we can make sure we continue this conversation and commit to becoming caring congregations. So the first one, I'm going to ask if everyone can commit to pledging to do no harm, and also pledging to becoming a caring congregation. So if you commit to that, I would like you to put a star in the chat. I'm going to go ahead. Awesome, awesome. Love to see all those stars. My second ask of all of you is, once we pledge to do no harm and pledge to become caring communities, is to commit to coming to our next webinar. It's going to be on September 3rd, and we're going to continue this conversation and again talk more in detail about what your specific congregation can do to help in your community. There's people already out there doing the work, amazing work to help this. So it's just a matter of getting it onto a bigger scale, and again, just opening the conversation from congregation to congregation to see how we can all work together to overcome addiction. And then finally, I can't emphasize enough how important spreading the word about this is. So if you can commit to coming to the next webinar, I'm going to also ask if you can bring at least 2 people, whether that's a neighbor, brother, sister, son, aunt, uncle, whoever you want to bring onto the webinar. I'm going to encourage you to do that as well. The more people and hands on deck, the better. And so please remember to register for our next webinar. Again, we will send all the information needed to register, and to all the resources that we covered today if you need a little refresher before the next webinar as well. I don't have anything else to add. Team, do you have?
I have one more thing I was supposed to add.
Yeah.
So I think everybody who's on here did register, which is how you got the Zoom link. But if somebody's got on this webinar by being sent that link by somebody else besides me, if you could please put your name and your email and your phone number in the chat, or at least your name and your email. That way we can include you in our follow-up communications. You can send that through the all chat, or you can also send it just to me or Mona as the host, and we'll get that and we can include you. And then just finally, I know that there was a lot of interesting things, at least in our discussion on our breakout session. This was a pretty sort of, on-ramping with a lot of story. Of what we wanted to focus on this first webinar was hearing people's stories, because we think it's so critical and everybody has a unique story. But I think there may be other topics that may be surfacing. We're still working on honing in some of the content for some of the upcoming webinars. So I just want to put it out there. If there are particular topics or things that you believe that are really critical to cover with the community, with the faith community, that you would like to encourage us to consider, our team that's putting these together, we would welcome that 100%. I am just excited about all the folks that are on this call tonight, and I appreciate the leadership and the the commitment that so many of you have, and we would love to hear from you. So we may also send out some kind of very quick feedback thing that won't take forever, but just if you have things to drop in so we can hear you as a feedback loop, we would welcome you. Okay, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you everyone so much for joining us tonight. Team, if you want to stick around after, we can talk about things. Otherwise, wonderful seeing everyone. We'll follow up with you, and we hope that we can see you on the next webinar. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.